action or successful direct action look like to you?
Well, I think the government has kind of like given us a blueprint of what type of direct action does work. During the George Floyd riots, they didn't arrest Derek Chauvin until someone bombed the police precinct. Like, the government's telling you, like, they will make moves if you do things like bomb a police precinct. And then you look at like what's happening in Afghanistan. The Taliban kept fighting the biggest military in the world for 20 years. They endured, they sacrificed, they endured. And now they have Afghanistan. And I think, you know, I might not agree with like a lot of the politics that Al-Qaeda is involved in, but I do respect their conviction and their willingness to give up their lives for something that's bigger than them, which is something I feel like is very lacking in the American left. Because I don't know if it's mainly because of the religious aspect over there in the Middle East, like makes people bond more and makes people like be more willing to sacrifice. But like, to me, like we're way past self-defense, like, because you know we're under constant violence all the time. I know in my hood and in your area too, CJ, murder rates went up 20% under COVID, and that's with most people stuck in the house, and somehow the murder rate went up 20% in your neighborhood and my neighborhood, and that's not changing anytime soon. ICE isn't going to stop coming into my neighborhood anytime soon, and it's Democrats sending them in. So at some point, like, you need to like draw a line in the sand and be like, is holding up a sign in the crowd, like, is that enough? Because the government doesn't seem to give a shit when people do like regular protests.
Fast forward quickly to where we are now and what's happened since the Trump administration. And you could see it because everywhere, the entire cabinet was made up of billionaires. And if you didn't get it then, I mean, we did, as far as me as a nurse and my wife, who's a teacher, a special ed teacher, if we're not seeing that it's for-profit corporatization of education, healthcare, you name it, all the way down the line, we're screwed if we don't do something. So we end up going on strike because of safe staffing and proper PPE equipment. And then furloughing in the middle of a pandemic, they furloughed over 100 nurses. Wow. And they said they could collect unemployment. Tenants saved money, and we said we're in big trouble. We're gonna have to strike. And so, doesn't it come down in March? We did call for a strike, and now you're talking. I think we're 256 days. I can't even remember.
Longest strike
in Massachusetts history. And anyway, so I was just telling your colleagues here that I said, I don't know if I'm really the one to talk right now because I'm so angry. And I'm angry I'm a Democrat, predominantly my whole life. And I told some of the local Democrats here that I said, I'm not voting Democrat coming 2022, 2024. I'm going to vote socialist. I'm going to vote Green Party. I am done.
To accept the deaths of people who are dehumanized, and labeling them as terrorists is one of the easiest ways of doing that. But when Biden took power, he reversed that designation. So the Houthis are no longer under the FTO list. Now, what's interesting is the IRA was also designated under the foreign terrorist organization by Trump. That has not been reversed by Biden. The idea that we're talking about Yemen, and the reason I point out the difference is because I do think that it is important to know the differences between them. But, and I agree with Nick, the idea though is still to protect U.S. imperial interests. The fact that these are the differences, first of all, that tells you, by the way, how arbitrary the FTO list is right there, right? One president says they're terrorists, one president says they're not. So there's this idea of the arbitrariness of this entire category of terrorists beyond the way that it's used in media. But I think that media point that Nick brought up was the most important point. It's the fact that the way that this apparatus, that's what people are consuming the most, right? People are consuming media the most. They're listening to Chris Hayes more than they're actually listening to the president. And so the fact that the narratives on these things shift so dramatically when there's one person who's president, one party who's president, and a different party, really exemplifies the fact that the media is not, especially, I mean, we're using the word journalist loosely at this point, because that's party politics. If you're following the party line, you're not a journalist. You're supposed to be, indifferent to what's going on. It's supposed to be not biased. It's actually supposed to be what holds, in an actual democratic country, it's supposed to be what holds that democratic apparatus accountable, because that is the only way to do it, is if you have an informed citizenry, and that informed citizenry comes through two pillars: education, which at this point is crap in this country, and the other is the media, journalism, news.
So what happened was these 17 Nobel Prize winners write an open letter supporting the bill. Then the Democrats, the disaster known as the Democratic Party, takes all that stuff out. Now the bill is less than half what it would have been had it stayed the same at 3.5 trillion. And you still have the pathological liar known as Joe Biden walking around saying 17, I mean, he's a hard time saying it because the man can't put sentences together. That's a whole other issue. 17 Nobel Prize winners support this bill. No, liar, they don't. They supported your old bill. They supported the bill that was not what we needed in the moment, but was actually had some pretty good things in it. That bill's gone. You threw it in the trash. So what the Democrats do is they take the progressive language, water it down, make the bill, then do the little performance as if they're going back and forth, take it out, and then brag that 3 months ago this person supported it. Well, that's not the bill anymore. So that is unserious. And here's the problem. We're talking about it on, your show. They're not talking about it on CNN. And they know. So why don't they do it? Why is there no criticism? If it was Trump doing that, it would be, oh, look, he gutted the bill.
They literally cut taxes for the rich in the Build Back Better.
I'm an abolitionist. Like, I want to be very clear. I'm an abolitionist, and abolition is about building. Abolition is about transformation. It is not about destruction. In order to build something better, though, the slate has to be wiped away. The slate has to be wiped away. You know what I'm saying? And as far as, not wanting to organize with, right-wingers or whatever, I mean, here's the thing, like, they're working class people as well. My line really is anti-racism, anti-imperialism. You have to be a womanist. Like, there are certain things that are non-negotiables for me if you're going to be in community with me. Like, you can't be transphobic. Like, there are just certain things that need to be learned and unlearned in those circles, in those communities. But I very much think that there's a lot of utility in a Black-led, Indigenous-led working class movement in which there are multiple races that are involved in it. There are multiple races that are backing it. There are multiple races that have some part in, like, the collective bargaining agreement, while still centering and standing in solidarity with, the collective demands of the Black trans, Black queer, Indigenous trans, Indigenous queer, just Indigenous people in general. Like, standing in solidarity with those values and those demands as well. Like, that is how we're going to move forward. And we're in a spot where the internet is free. So if you want to radicalize yourself, use fucking Google. Like, just Google the CIA. Just start there. Start with the CIA. I mean, like, Google, if you're Black and you're not radicalized yet, Google the racial wealth gap, bro. Like, I promise you, no matter how much they try to tell you, you will never be NBA YoungBoy, my nigga. It's not gonna happen. It's not that I don't believe in your rap dreams. It's like, it's just not gonna be you, because they don't want us to win. Period. Right. And that's just the reality situation. If you don't want to use Google, read some books. If you need a book list, I can DM you.
Verdade, claro que não. É mentira. Mentiroso.
Okay, so I asked your question, Nick, about what they think about what Bolsonaro declared in the summit, And what she's saying is like, no, Bolsonaro is a liar. Bolsonaro has no, like, he's a gangster, he's a liar. And everything he promotes is against the originary people of Brazil. Because all the, like, he's been selling wood. The president of the country has been selling wood from like preserved areas, and the preserved areas are the indigenous areas. And he's killing these people because he wants to get the wood. And those are, she used the word endemica. It's when those are trees are only from that region, only from that part, the Brazilian part of the Amazon rainforest. And they are going extinct because of the exploitation of that area. Also, there is mines, mineral mines, I hope I'm saying it right. And she said something that I really want to translate. She said, he represents the international capitalism, the interest of the imperialistic core, which is UK, US, and European Union.
Yeah, thank you for that, Josan. I also want to get Peter and Kramer to see if they have any thoughts as well. But I want to share something that I believe is very relevant. And the headline says it itself, don't be fooled by Bolsonaro's pledges. Because Bolsonaro, just like Trump and just like the neoliberal establishment in our country, has been horrific in the case of the environment because they serve their capitalist oligarchs. And Bolsonaro, as Claudia is helping explain to us, he led an indigenous genocide in his country.
I didn't solve every problem when I was president, but the fact is that as hard as it is, we can still make it better. It's hard to undo the legacy of discrimination that goes back centuries, but we can make it better. It's hard to deal with special interests who want to keep the status quo when you're trying to make the economy more fair and just, but you can make it better. It's hard in a big country where people disagree to get everybody moving in the same direction, but we can do.
Should we play the rest? Do you guys hear what he's saying?
That's Neil. He's describing incrementalism. He's describing liberalism. He's describing the whole concept of liberalism. Take this crumb and be satisfied till you get your next crumb. Fight for your next crumb. That's it. And you hold your hand like this. You get what I'm saying? It's all it's all part of the whole, it's all part of the whole thing. Like, that's a neoliberalism thing right here, right? That's the neoliberalism grip. Yes, you know what I'm saying? So, and he's trying to make it seem casual, like he's just talking off the cuff. When the teleprompter, so that's why he's moving like this. He's being more skilled. He's more skilled. He's trying. He's making it seem like he's just talking. No, he's reading that entire speech. But this is why he's dangerous. Because Barack Obama has the ability to inspire and speak, which is, for a president, is one of the most important things when trying to be elected. Being able to talk off the cuff, he is able to do that at some time. You get what I'm saying? He's able to push the right buttons, and he is the politician who has put on a clinic on how to talk like a progressive, but not actually be a progressive. That's why so many young people voted for him initially, because he knew the speak. He knew how to say the words like AOC, like the squad, but not governing, not following through with those things.
We have a problem here. We have a serious problem. Let's go to the racial issue for people who will try to say that this does not involve race at all. That is 100% false. Let's be clear. Ahmaud Arbery was jogging through a neighborhood. Something that he does apparently quite often, from what I read about this situation. So that was not like this off the wall thing. There were three white men that found him to be suspicious. So we have to ask ourselves, Why did they find him to be suspicious? If it was a white man who was jogging through that neighborhood, would they have been as concerned? Now, they went on to say that he was looking through a house, a window of a house. Now, to be clear here, in the South, it's actually very common during construction. My dad and I used to do this as well. When they are building houses, especially in new subdivisions, it is actually quite common for people to take a walk, take a jog, and look inside the houses. These are when the houses are still open. It has not been sold. This is not something that is uncommon. I want to make that very clear. The second problem that we run into, if they felt that he was suspicious, which they shouldn't have in the first place, why didn't they pick up the phone and call the police and let the police do their job? Why? They tried to take matters into their own hands. Now, we've seen this before. We saw this with the Trayvon Martin situation, where George Zimmerman, he did call the police. They told him to stay inside, and he went out there and took matters into his own hands. The fact that those three men could just run up on him and kill him and be okay with that, that is a problem. Later on, it came out that the DA was actually hiding evidence with this situation.
And, you know, I just want to really say how much I appreciate your platform and both of you for doing what you're doing and the work that you're doing and showing up and really advocating for people's voices and providing unity instead of division. So I'm really humbled to be with you. So thank you. What I would say is that, you know, coming forward about sexual assault, you know, sexual assault and sexual harassment, it's an equal opportunity offender, okay? It's not, it crosses all socioeconomic lines. It doesn't care, you know, and so the fact that the Democrat elites have decided to protect their own, so to speak, but yet still wave the Me Too flag as if they're really interested in protecting the interests of women, it's the hypocrisy is astounding. You know, Rose McGowan, who is a cultural resetter and has nothing to do with Me Too. In fact, she just tweeted that out today. Like, she doesn't want to be attached to that. Tarana Burke actually was the founder of Me Too and had a good, and that movement that she created was about, you know, Black women and Black little girls' voices not being heard. And then that got co-opted by Alyssa Milano and the Democratic crew, the elite. And they kind of, and then they put on their hats, their, you know, vagina hats, and walked around and had these parades, and it became a hashtag instead of what it was supposed to be about. You know, all of us, you know, gender-based violence is prevalent in our world, but in American culture, it is institutionalized. And it's institutionalized with the patriarchy and misogyny, and it's all part of it. And, you know, one of the things Tarana Burke was trying to get across too was just the silencing of Indigenous and Black voices and those stories. And I came forward about Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, you know, when I came forward at the time, he was going to drop out of the presidential race. So I went for help to Time's Up, not knowing that one of the founders of Time's Up was being paid over $2.2 million to do public relations for Joe Biden.
I think it's important that we all stop painting with broad brushes for people who may live in certain areas and start seeing them for who they are, having discussions with them and seeing where they are. And if they may have some flaws in their logic, maybe it be the human thing to help them to work through that so they can come to a more rational conclusion.
Right, because you have to remember that they're also propagandized.
Yes.
So you have to, they will say whack shit. I assure you, they will say the whack shit. And the thing is, it is very white out here. It's actually, it's so stupid. It's like the one thing we didn't look into when we were looking for a place to move. Because we're white, I guess that's our privilege. We just move about wherever we want. And what we didn't realize is we were moving from Dorchester, you know, Boston, to the whitest place sort of ever. And so you have to keep that in mind too when I talk to my neighbors and they say things like, oh, I hope, I don't know if I'm going to watch football this year because, if anyone kneels, it's like, and they say, well, Black Lives Matter. And you got to be like, has the man ever met a Black person? I mean, it's entirely likely that they either have never met one or they definitely don't know anybody.
Introduce them to me. No,
it's like, it's maybe in passing, it's like you've seen a person of color. I mean, it's not like we don't have anybody of color out here, but it's few and far between. And you just have to sort of keep in mind like where these people are coming from. In a conversation where my friend, who's a Republican, said that something about healthcare, it was the illegals in the emergency rooms. And I said, well, I wouldn't say it's the, I said, well, here's what you do. Because the thing is maybe there are a lot of illegals in the emergency room, but that's because they don't even have to be illegals, but because without health insurance, where else?
If I can interject here real quick, just to add in my 2 cents. The sad fact is that I understand what a lot of regular people, voters, who are probably not aware of how bad things are, what people like AOC or Bernie Sanders or the squad mean to them. I get it. I remember when they got elected into office. I, too, was happy. I didn't expect them to get these kind of big wins. But after a while, as the months were passing by, there was a change taking place that maybe very few people really saw firsthand, and that mask was slipping off. It is our job as journalists and commentators and people who support progressive movements and community change to hold the leaders accountable for their actions. AOC is a human being like anyone else, flawed, makes mistakes, and yes, can be corrupt too. That's the issue. And the thing is, for all those people that go to bat for caring for water for the progressive movement in the Democratic Party, you got to realize they were never going to raise the ruckus. When they get bullied or silenced, or when they say that Biden, a person who will vote against busing, who is against desegregation, who made, again, student debt for what it is when he sided with the credit card corporations in 2005. This is the same man who led us to war in Iraq. This is the same Biden who's been against any kind of progressive change. AOC had the audacity to say he's exceeding expectations and not fight back. When AOC and those other 15 congressmen and women were on the forced to vote petition, when it came down for that Medicare for All town hall, when they were needed the most, when they were the ones that ran on Medicare for All, they were silenced, or either that were saying to people, how dare you, you're being violent. You're being violent, watch your tone. And what about Bernie Sanders too? Joe Biden, he said he's his good friend. They're pals. That's your friend, Bernie. You said it yourself. That's your buddy, your friend, your friend, your friend. The progressive movement in the Democratic Party was always going to be co-opted because the people that we assumed would fight back didn't.
The effects of trauma with no repercussions, Breonna Taylor being murdered, like what's happening with her family. The cop is, nothing's happening to him. He's, out doing what he does or whatever that person's doing. I forget his name, the Hispanic teenager that was murdered soon after, like late last year in LA by the LAPD. His family, what are they doing? Like the people who are left here, the survivors of people that are murdered, the survivors of people, who die because of oppression. And there's a lot of different ailments that can lead to that person's death, including murder. My cousin, and I told them, when I went to go visit the first time, I said, we have to understand that this is oppression that's happening here. That was my message to my family the first time I went there. We have to understand that this is not an individual act. This is an oppression, including the shooter.